Welcome to Classics You Slept Through. We are the book podcast where we read and discuss classic books. I'm your host, Kyle Davis, along with a girl who has air conditioning, my sister, Meredith. How's it going today, Mare?
I'm a little chilly, actually.
You're terrible.
It's
so
chilly
I have
in here.
no air conditioning today, so it's very warm. I have the windows open, so we're going to get some background noise from the neighborhood, I'm sure, today. But today we are what? I can't even talk. Today we are discussing Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We're discussing chapters 10 through 15, which, if you go back one episode in your podcast feeds, you'll find those chapters if you have not listened to them. While you're doing that, while you're checking your podcast feeds for the last episodes and whether or not you listen to it or not, why don't you also flip on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a nice rating and review. Tell people that you like the show, because that's how other folks find it. You can also go over to Spotify and give us a star rating if you're listening to us on Spotify. And if you're on any other podcast platform, you can still go to one of those other two sites and give us a little nod if you like what we're doing here on Classics You Slept Through.
Flip on over. I like how you said that.
Well, you just
I don't know what that means.
Change tabs. I guess people aren't listening on their computers, are they?
I don't know. Maybe while they work.
Perhaps. I guess open your phone browser. Maybe I should have said it that way. That's probably a better way to say it. All right. Well, anyways, today we're going to get into a little bit of meat of, would you say this is the meat of the book that we're getting into here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Kind
Absolutely.
of the crux of it. So to catch you up to speed, we've got Victor Frankenstein. He's made this monster. Imbued it with life. Imbued it with life. And then it ran off. And then for the next year or so, Victor sort of had a mental breakdown, hung out in his college dorm. Buddy of his showed up. They went camping. They trooped about the town. And then he decides, it's summer break or whatever, I'm going to go home. Finds out his brother's dead. He immediately, because why not, he blames this monster that he created, and he goes out to hunt for him to kill him. Well, in
he
these
also
chapters,
saw him. He also saw him.
That's true. He did.
And
He
was
did
like,
see
"What's
him.
he doing here? Oh, must be him, because I abandoned him for 2 years,
Right?
And also abandoned him immediately the moment he became alive. I was like,
Right.
And I ran away.
And never looked for him and didn't care.
Right. Didn't
what
care.
he did. Yeah. Well, in these chapters, we are going to find out what Frank Jr. I don't know, the creature, what he's been doing in the intervening time. So, you ready to kick this off?
I am. Let's do it.
All right.
Chapter 10.
Chapter 10. All right, so Chapter 10 finds Dr. Frankenstein wandering in the mountains, and eventually he runs into his creation. And he says, "I'm here to destroy you. I'm going to fight you." Well, he doesn't realize that he's made his creature superhuman. So he's basically, this is like, Shaq playing basketball with an 8-year-old or something. He just evades him. He's kind of holding him at arm's length. Victor tries to take a swing. Creature sort of steps to the side and is like, "Dude, what are you doing?"
And like an 8-year-old, he is full of confidence. And he believes that he could potentially do harm to this 8-foot-tall, extra-large, hardy creature that he's made.
Right. So Frankenstein is up in these mountains. He's basically on a glacier, right? Mm-hmm. And he's carefully, gingerly moving over the rocks and these crags and these ice patches. But he sees his creature in the distance just speedily bounding at a rapid pace. I mean, he's a Superman. So this doesn't tip him off that he can't really physically confront him. Not to mention that I don't think at any point have we been told that Frankenstein is a robust man. He's a sickly scientist who had a mental breakdown for 2 years. So.
Yeah. He's not well.
No,
He's not well.
I don't know why
been.
he thought he could physically confront the creature. But the creature, while Frank is swinging and seething and angry, the creature very calmly is like, "Hey man, look, you made me, and then you left me. The least you owe me is you should hear me out. Like, what I've been doing, hear my side of the story." Mm-hmm. And he appeals to him through, even legal theory. He says, "Look, even your human laws let the accused defend themselves. So let me at least defend myself. That's the least you owe me as my creator." So
I agree.
Yeah, it is. I thought this was a nice parallel with we had just gone through Justine Moritz's trial, where we had these impassioned defenses of her, and Frankenstein was upset that the legal system did not work in Justine's case, but he's ready to jump straight to vigilante justice and destroy his creature without even listening. So he does decide, yes, I'll listen to you. Junior says, hey, I've got a cottage right up here.
Junior?
Come on. Come on.
Junior?
Well, I mean, I keep saying the creature, the monster. Sure. He says, I've got a cottage up here. Come on up and listen to my story. Frankenstein says, sure. Come on. And that's where we go with chapter 10. Is there any notes, anything you want to talk about with here on chapter 10?
Yeah, I think as we move forward into the next chapters where we're going to see Junior, JC, Junior Creature, I don't know, where we see the things he's going to think about while Victor Frankenstein is walking through nature, and he is commenting on the sublime, and he is finding like peace and solace, and he's looking for that in nature. He calls to the world. He says, alas, why does man boast of sensibilities superior to those apparent in the brute? It only renders them more necessary beings. If our impulses were confined to hunger, thirst, and desire, we might be nearly free. But now we are moved by every wind that blows and a chance word or scene that the word may convey to us. And first of all, I think that's interesting that he's thinking, if we were like whatever he means by brute, which maybe he thinks that's what a creature is, or that's what he thinks animals are, hunger,
a base
thirst,
creature,
desire.
yeah. Driven by impulses and biological need.
Yeah, he believes that therein lies some sort of freedom. But as it turns out, humans aren't that way. We have sensibilities. He is moved by nature. And we are mercurial creatures, I suppose he's saying. Which, as Frankenstein, as Junior, as you call him, is going to share his story. He has a motive for sharing the story. He is hoping, as we'll find out, to move Victor Frankenstein. He's hoping that sensibility, that he can sway him to something. So I want to keep that in mind as we look at what the creature also talks about as he takes us through his story about coming into some sort of like other consciousness. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think that your point that the creature is appealing to Frankenstein's intellect. He says, he thinks to himself, surely I'll be able to reason with Frankenstein and get my side across, and he'll see the reason in what I'm talking about, which is sort of, again, the parallel to the Moritz trial, where Frankenstein thought the same thing. Surely I can convince the judges that Justine is innocent by my eloquence, and I'll appeal to their logic and whatnot, and it didn't work in her case. I guess remains to be seen if it'll work in Junior's case. And this also seems to be a theme with him, as we'll see towards the end of our section. This is not the first time he tries appealing to man's intellect, I guess.
And sensibilities.
Yes. I got a good laugh out of sort of the juvenility of Junior here, because at one point Frankenstein says to him, he says, relieve me of the sight of your detested form. And so he puts his hand over Frankenstein's eyes and says, there you go, you can't see me now.
Where'd I go?
Hey! I just thought that was just a very nice, backseat of the car, like, I'm not touching you. Oh, I can't see you anymore. So,
you don't like looking at me? Close your eyes.
Exactly. Frankenstein gets angry. He's like, get out of here. All right. Okay, so then we get into chapter 11. And the creature tells us what happened, basically, from the moment that Frankenstein freaked out, and he became alive, and he ran off. And in the beginning, he can't really see. His eyes are sort of cloudy, so he can't really make out shapes. He only understands sensations. He feels hunger, he feels thirst, but that's all he kind of knows. And it's dark. It was night when he left. He sees the moon. The moon comes up, and that fascinates him for a little while. He really finds that interesting. Takes him a few days, and then he begins to sort of distinguish these sensations. He hears songs. He hears birds singing. He can't say what they are yet. He doesn't know that this is bird song or what. But he's starting to learn. He comes across some travelers had left a fire burning. Smokey the Bear would be very upset, but they didn't extinguish their fire before leaving. And so now he gets to feel it's wintertime, right? So he gets the warmth from the fire, so that brings him some pleasure. And he also learns, like any child growing up, he sticks his hand on the hot stove, he sticks his hand into the fire, he feels pain for the first time. He also sees that they left some food. There's some animal parts left there. He cooks it in the fire, sticks it in there, and he realizes it tastes better cooked. So he tries it with like fruit and nuts. Cooking fruit didn't really work, but the nuts actually taste kind of good after he puts them in the fire. He goes in search of food. He comes across a hut and freaks the guy out when he walks in. But he gets to try things. Yeah, poor old guy goes running. And I do appreciate that he says, yeah, he went running faster than his decrepit body looked like he could move. I was impressed. So,
Good on you.
It reminds me of old Scooby-Doo cartoons, like when the monster first shows up and the person they run and their legs are going and they
that sound
they take off.
where it takes a while for them to actually move, but their legs
the little
are going
bongos,
in a circle.
yeah. Exactly. So he finds some food in the guy's hut. Cheese, bread, milk, and wine, which he did not like. He's not a big wine guy, so I'm with him there.
Little virtues sticking in here. Mary Shelley's
exactly.
like being conscious of her, the time and place she lives, and of the audience. Like, oh no, not drinking.
Yeah. Well, we can talk virtue signaling as we get further into these chapters. Shelley's doing her work here. Don't worry.
Yep.
Then he goes into the village. The villagers see him and freak out. So now he's got two experiences of people freaking out when they see him.
They freak out and they come to attack him and chase him off. Yeah. Like that classic Frankenstein monster movie scene is what I'm imagining.
Right. Torches and pitchforks and they're going after him. But he's able to escape them. He eludes them. And he finds a little hovel next to a cottage. And so he crawls into it. And I guess this is just a disused storage thing that the cottagers never go into. Which apparently abuts right up against the house, because he talks about there's a crack in the wood that he's able to peer in through a little peephole, so we get a little peeping Tom action.
Creepazoid.
Exactly. He can see into the living room, I guess, of the cottage. And he can see pretty well, as we'll find out. So he starts to watch them and go about their daily business. There's an old man and there's a young boy and young girl, I guess. Adult, like teen. Young
adults.
Young adults. He's able to sneak in. He steals a cup for some water, because there's, I guess, a stream nearby he can get some water from. Steals some bread. So now he watches them, and he learns about music. They have a guitar that they like to play in the evening, and he likes it. He likes it better than what the birds sing. And so now up to this point, his only interactions with people have been the old man freaking out and the village attacking him. But now he's seeing, for the first time, human affection. The old man and the children. Turns out the old man's blind. Does he quite figure that out yet? I'm not sure at this point.
I think he does.
He probably does.
And he figures out their...
Yeah, he figures out they're poor.
Brother, sister, father.
Right. And he also figures out they're poor because he sees they have meager portions at dinner, but the kids share with the dad kind of more than their share. And
I think he figures out he's blind because the kids go without eating, but the dad doesn't know that. So they share their portions with him, and then they lack, but dad can't tell.
Right. Okay. Yep. He also discovers for the first time they have candles, so they have a means of staying awake once the sun has gone down. And he discovers reading. He doesn't quite understand it yet, but they sit around in the evening and they read to each other aloud, which obviously in this podcast we're proponents of.
Big fans of, yeah.
Yep. So, maybe Mary Shelley will update it and they'll listen to us. I don't know.
What I like about this chapter a lot, what I like a lot about this chapter is, as a reader, Mary Shelley doesn't say, and Mary Shelley doesn't write him saying, and I slowly discovered my senses. You experience him doing those things, and it took me a little while. I'm like, what is happening? Why can't, he's being born, and he can't see quite yet, and he doesn't know what anything is, and we discover it along with him, and I thought it was really well done. And it once I realized what was happening, I was like, holy, like, nice, really good job, Mary Shelley. I think it's an incredible chapter when he's discovering his senses.
Well, there was a moment in my edition where when he discovers the moon and how much he likes it, it says just a light or whatever or something attracted him, but then in brackets they had added it was the moon. So I don't think, I don't think that Shelley wrote that in there. So I think maybe some editor
it's
later.
The moon.
Yeah, hey, if you haven't figured this out, he's looking at the moon. What? That was just the one sort of aside. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, he's looking at the moon. I kind of guessed that, but
I didn't notice that. I don't know if my copy had that or not.
Yeah, mine did. So I just thought that was interesting. Okay, so that takes us to chapter 12. Do you have anything else for 11?
Well, 11, I've got two quotes that I found.
Okay, go ahead.
Interesting. That he tries to express himself, and he tries to speak, and when he does, it's so horrible it frightens him into silence.
Okay.
He said, sometimes I wish to express my sensations in my own mode, but the uncouth and inarticulate sounds which broke from me frightened me into silence again. Aww.
And that's sort of a theme too. Like, he recognizes, and this is something I think we'll pull out, is his otherness, right?
Yeah.
Like, he recognizes that he is different than what is going on.
Yeah. He eventually, we're going to get to it, but he eventually sees his own reflection in a pool, and he's like, oh, I am as horrible as I thought, because he really likes looking at the cottagers. He finds them enjoyable to look at, and then he sees himself.
Right.
And is upset. I'm trying to move my Kindle along so I can find my next highlighted part, but let me just pull up my highlights. It's so much easier to flip through a book.
Yeah.
But I'm working with this Kindle thing.
I like the electronic, but that's just
I like it too for taking it places.
Right.
Oh no, that was the only one I had. Never mind. My next quote is chapter 13.
Okay. All right. Chapter 13 is a good one. We'll get there. So then we get to chapter 12. And again, talking about this otherness here, he realizes that they have this affection, and it actually unsettles him how much he wants to join them. He wants to be part of this family. Here he figures out the man's blind. The girl works in the house, and that the boy works outdoors. He's watched them long enough that he kind of gets their routine down. He's also figured out that they're unhappy and that they're poor. So he's discovering these sort of concepts that there's happy and sad, there's rich and poor, and he can tell that they're upset that they don't have very much.
He realizes that they use their names, so he's putting language.
Right.
He's making the sound to visual connection. That's Felix, that's Agatha,
right,
and that's father. Whatever.
Right, yeah.
It's
a couple of, yeah.
Yeah.
And he figures out that because they're poor, he starts to feel bad. He's like, I'm going to stop stealing food from them. I'm only going to gather nuts and berries and what I can find in the forest, and I'm actually going to help him out. So in the evenings, he begins to cut wood so Felix doesn't have to cut so much and work so hard during the day.
It's interesting that Junior here is 8 feet tall, massive, yet agile, and can bound. And not only is he less sensitive to the physical elements, he also can subsist upon a lot less than us. So nuts and berries is just fine for him.
Right.
And I'm just like, why? Maybe because they're dead parts and they're not growing anymore? Like, he's not growing. Could be. I just thought of that just a second.
Yeah. It's just sort of sustain life.
Yeah, whatever.
Just keep it going, whatever he's got going on, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't have to grow taller. Maybe is blood flowing through him?
I mean, it must be. Which kind of begs the question where Frankenstein went and got all that good blood without refrigeration in those days. I don't know.
Maybe he met Jonathan Harker somewhere and he's like, look, I know a guy.
There you go. But it starts to get to be spring. They don't have to work quite so hard. There's more food now. And he kind of gets into a routine. So he wakes up in the morning and he kind of watches them. And then they go out and they do their chores. And while they're doing that, he naps during the day. And then they come home in the afternoon. He watches them in the afternoon, evening. And then at night, he goes out and he chops wood and he shovels snow or whatever kind of needs to be done around the house. And of course, the family has noticed this, right? Like they don't really investigate, which I've always kind of found odd that he's in this building, which is attached to their house, and they've never seen, like, footsteps or, footprints or hear him snoring during the day or anything.
He replaces the wood. Like, he thinks he must be, but he right. Replaces the wood when he goes back in. And it's just big enough for him to sit up. Right. He can't stand in it or anything like that. So it's like, I guess if you're 8 feet tall, if he's equally proportioned in his torso and his legs, it's 4 feet high, more or less. I don't know. Right.
And at no point do they go, hey, somebody's shoveling our snow and somebody's stacking more wood. Should we look in that old shed we have out there? Nah, we'll just leave it. Surely there's not somebody living in there. Anyway, you got to do a little suspension of disbelief with this book.
Well, I mean...
Yeah, I know. Well, okay, yes, in general, but...
It is the little things, though. Like, I'm totally in suspension of disbelief. Like, Viola right now is obsessed with Frozen, so she's watching it over and over, and it's like, oh, Elsa has magic powers that come out of her hands. I'm in. I got it.
Sure.
Nobody slips on the ice. Nobody. They're like running up the ice stairs.
Yes.
The reindeer's the only one who's like, oh, I slipped.
Yes.
They just like take off running. Fine. Elsa doesn't slip. I get it.
Well,
but
I mean, if they live in like fake Sweden, like surely they have like good tread on their shoes or something. Maybe that's
but it's summer.
Like,
it was summer anyway.
It was
before Elsa set off in eternal winter.
This is true. Well, they all switched into their winter shoes at that point. So anyway, so he's got this desire to help and alleviate their suffering. And this gives him the motivation. He says, you know what? If I'm going to really help these people, I need to be able to communicate. I'm going to start working on language. I'm going to really pay attention and figure out how to talk to them. And then we close this chapter with spring kind of arriving. So that was his winter, just kind of watching and falling into a routine.
And he also comes up with the idea in this chapter that he believes he wants to present himself to them. He wants to be with them.
Right.
And he's like, I can't do it yet. Like, what? I can't say anything. And my own voice scares me. But I think this is where the idea starts to really churn in his mind. Like, he strongly desires companionship. And he's, like, in love with this family. You know, they're like his celebrities or his YouTuber that he feels connected with, even though they know nothing about him.
That's a good parallel for nowadays.
I know. I think so. I think about these like ASMR YouTubers who like get real close and say wonderful, nice things to you. Like, it was a hard day. I'm right here with you while you fall asleep. Someone somewhere has got to be like deeply obsessed with those people.
Oh, I guarantee.
Deeply. And it's a little bit scary, I think, for those people. And I'm not saying I'm one of them. I'm not.
Of course not. No. Certainly. And no one listens to our books in that manner as well, I'm sure. Right? Of course not. Yes, we do love all of you, though, very personally and deeply.
No, stop it. Oh. I don't.
We do enjoy that you listen to the podcast, though. We do like it. And because we do it for you guys. We don't just... If nobody listens... I mean, we still do it if nobody listened. Probably not.
Mom will always listen.
She will.
We put her to sleep
deeply.
at night.
We do deeply and truly love you, Mom. So
that's absolutely true.
That's a true one. All right.
Anyway.
All right. So anyway, we get to chapter 13, which I have. I've called this one the woke chapter. What do you think?
Is it the woke chapter?
I think. Let's go through it. I think it is a little bit.
Because there's a sweet Arabian.
There's Shelley's. That's probably not so much, but Shelley's got some interesting things that she does throw in here that I felt were maybe a little beyond her time, shall we say? But we'll
her mom was a big feminist activist, so
there's definitely some of that in here. So we'll get to that. And remembering that this book was originally early 1800s, like the first decade, right? The first edition came out 70. Yeah, I mean it was like 80. I mean, it was updated through, but I think it was like 1800 something was the first edition. Anyway, I just found that interesting with some of the stuff we're going to hit here coming up.
1818. I was thinking 1817. Maybe she conceived of the idea in 17. I don't know why I was thinking 17.
Maybe, yeah, because I know it was updated a few times through. Volume 1 was 1818.
Yeah, it was published January 1st, 1880. So obviously she wrote it in 1817.
She wrote it earlier. All right, so then we get to a visitor arriving. And this turns out to be Safi, who is described by Felix as his sweet Arabian. She doesn't understand their language. They don't understand her. But they have... At one point she had a translator, but at this point, no?
Yeah, so once she arrives,
gesturing.
yeah.
Right. So they're just sort of gesturing and
probably speaking really loudly at her.
Right, exactly. But he figures out that there's sort of an affection between Felix and her, and Felix starts to teach her French. This is what they're speaking. And so he decides to start learning along with her. So this is kind of a fortuitous occurrence for him that there's actually sort of formal language training now, and he can kind of follow along. And after about 2 months, he starts to kind of understand a little bit more, which is interesting because he's been observing them for some number of months through winter and into spring already. Mm-hmm. And now with that sort of base knowledge that he's picked up a few words here and there, now watching Felix teach Safi French, he actually starts to understand, he says. And this also, I guess it goes back to his superhuman abilities, right? Like his eyesight must be very good because he's peeping through a crack, and says that he starts to be able to read because as they're reading books, he's apparently able to see the book and figure out reading as well.
Well, they're formally teaching her letters, so I imagine there's some sort of blackboard or thing that they're writing on, and he's making the connections.
Right. So the thing that Felix decides to teach Safi as the primer that he's using is The Ruins of Empires by Volney, which I don't know if I would... That's a little heavier than what I taught my kids to read with, I think. We were doing, very basic, look, Iron Man is flying and things like that. And, he's reading about the rise and fall of empires. So I looked this one up. So this book, have you read this one by any chance?
I haven't read this one, no.
You have not? Okay. So this was published in 1792. Mm-hmm. So relative to when Frankenstein is published, the Frankenstein readers, this is a fairly recent book in the realm of books. And it was very, very influential in the late 18th, early 19th centuries, both in a philosophical and political sense. And apparently Thomas Jefferson even did a translation of the first part of it. It was that well known. So this is not like some book that she's just sort of pulling off the shelf here. This is a book that was known in this time. And what Volney does is he goes through and he talks a lot about what kind of makes some of these great historical empires fall, but in doing so, he's talking a lot about religion and wealth and rank and poverty and things like that. So the creature's getting these ideas as he's not just learning language, he's getting all these ideas. One interesting thing that in looking up this book, Volney proposed that someday all religions were eventually just going to merge into one single religion based on their underlying shared truths, which I thought was kind of interesting.
We're not there yet. Well,
we're not there yet,
certainly
right?
Not there yet.
But I think this is interesting that Shelley picks this book that's going around and has these ideas, because we're going to obviously talk some more about religion here coming up in short order. Through this,
go ahead.
Learning the language, he learns about religion, he learns about government, he learns about wealth and division between peoples. I found this really interesting because, again, we said this was 1817, right? And these are certainly right. This is certainly ideas that I think would Mary Shelley's Frankenstein be banned in Florida for talking about CRT is my question. Because she says the creature, he said, wept over the fate of the Native Americans.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this was even like, this was pre-Trail of Tears even. Like, so this is, Volney wrote this in 1792, talking about how America was treating Native Americans. So it's not like these ideas are new in, the 1970s or 1980s or whatever, but I certainly didn't grow up learning these ideas, right?
No.
This is not in the American education system throughout the 1980s when we went to school.
And I think it's incredible, actually, now that you bring that up. It's not the first time that Mary Shelley brings that up in this book. What happened to Native Americans in this country. And she's British, so... Right. She's not even American. And so at that time, there are other countries in the world looking at our country and being like, oh, they shouldn't be doing that. Right. And this is, like I said, this is before our even, like, quote-unquote major atrocity. This is before the Trail of Tears. This is before the quote-unquote Indian Wars of the later part of the 1800s. Just wild. I thought that, like, these ideas, well known and out there through Volney and, Mary Shelley secondhand, and the creature weeping over it. And never once did I grow up learning, like, other countries thought that this was a bad, like, that they judged us, or that it was, that anybody thought anything about it other than, well, that's what happens. Right, I know. Westward expansion and all that. Aren't you so glad that you've got what you've got? I don't... Yeah. It's... Well, kind of... So, I follow on Twitter a couple of, classic TV accounts. Today, in 1970, whatever, I don't remember the exact year, but the Schoolhouse Rock episode, Elbow Room, debuted today in history. And it's a fun little song about our westward expansion, and it certainly doesn't mention any atrocities. It just says, we felt like we needed some more room, so we, Lewis and Clark, they went west. It was great. Sacagawea took them, and cool. She totally wanted to. Now we've got plenty of room. Yeah, it was, I was like, interesting that I'm talking about this chapter on the day that, historically, that this episode of Schoolhouse Rock, which is sort of the shorthand, the shorthand for what I grew up, what my education was like growing up, right? Like, that was all over Saturday morning cartoons when I was a kid. Even into the 80s, Schoolhouse Rock was still certainly a huge thing. I didn't think it was gonna go there. I thought you were gonna say that it actually told the truth in some way, and then we learned it and forgot it. But no, not at all. It didn't. Not at all. No. And there was not throughout the whole little minute and a half, song and dance animation,
Sacagawea was the only native that I remember seeing. It was all just otherwise, white folks and settlers in the Oregon Trail, and we're gonna get west, and then hey, we're gonna build the Transcontinental Railroad, and we're gonna expand. It's our manifest destiny. Woo! Yeah. So anyway.
Vincent has latched onto this new, I guess, social justice song that happened to be on the radio, and he really liked it. And I don't remember the artist, but it's called You're Not Mad Enough. And basically it says, stop telling me I've got to calm down. How many heads have got to hit the ground before you wake up? You're not mad enough. And he's like, why is that person saying that? And I'm like, okay, how do I explain?
How do you explain this?
How do I explain this? Okay, bad things happen that shouldn't happen. People are angry about it. Some people aren't. And the people are angry, like we have to change things. And if you're not angry too, then we can't change it. And then he comes up with this analogy. I was like, do you understand? He's like, no, I don't think so. I was like, okay.
Honest, it's good, yeah.
So then he comes up with his own analogy. He's like, okay. And he also like played both parts. He's like, this is my voice. This is the other person's voice. I'm like, okay. He's like, so if somebody throws litter on the ground and they're like, I don't care, I'm going to litter. And I say, hey, you can't litter. The earth is dying. Don't you want food? And the other guy says, no. And I say, but then you won't have food because the earth will die. And he says, okay. And he throws it away. He got mad enough too, right? And I'm like, yeah.
Kind of?
Yes, kind of. Good job. And if that's his, like, it is hard to explain this. It's hard to explain westward expansion and all of that for real to kids, but it's possible, I think.
Sure.
To not put it on them in such a way where they are also at the end of class weeping in a way that they can't handle, like the creature. He's so upset about it.
He's extremely upset about it. Yeah.
And fair enough, he should be, but he's also, I guess, an adult, or maybe he's not. Is he an adult?
He's working towards it. I mean, he's learning.
Like really quickly.
I think at this stage, his understanding is not. I think him talking to Frankenstein is from an adult perspective. I think by that point in the story he is. But I think where he is now learning French, I don't think his mind has reached that yet. These books, as we'll see through the next couple chapters, I think these books are giving him those ideas and getting him that sort of liberal arts education that allows him to think and develop these ideas.
It seems like he was almost imbued, though, with either a fast pace or fast track toward, or maybe he was born with some sort of level of critical consciousness, because he's like, I'm not like these other people. Where are the, and you're right, maybe it's the books that like launch him into that, and he's having these realizations that humans and kids don't get until they're like middle school age. Right. It starts to develop. Yeah. Anyway.
So one of the other things he gets out of this Ruins of Empires is he learns about lineage and how, your name and who you are and where you come from, that's sort of where power comes from in the human realm. And he figures out, hey, I've got no history. I've got no family. I've got no wealth, friends, property. I'm completely alone. And he agonizes over this, that he is solitary, which is interesting to think about. He's telling this to his creator that he had begged, like, you owe me this. Like, you got to listen to me.
Yeah.
He decides that death is the only escape from pain, so that life is pain and suffering. And he also learns of gender inequality, throughout history. So, and familial love, which he's denied, but he's kind of getting it secondhand by watching this cottager family.
I like what he says. He says, these wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. Was man indeed at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time a mere scion of the evil principle, and at another as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared the lowest degradation, a condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. For a long time I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow. or even why there were laws and governments. Murder, but even laws and government. How do any of these things exist? And he learns of vice and bloodshed and all of this. And then he again goes on. He said, the words induced me to turn towards myself. So he's suddenly turning inward. I learned that the possessions of the most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied descent, united with riches. So to be virtuous and rich
and wealthy, yeah,
that means you're the best, A+. A man might be respected with only one of them. You could be awful and rich or wonderful and poor, but without any, he was considered, except in very rare instances, as a vagabond and a slave doomed to waste his powers for the profits of the chosen few. And what was I?
Because he's got nothing, right?
And
yeah,
and he doesn't even know if he's virtuous. Like, he's just learning of these things.
Right. These are just new ideas to him, and he's kind of sorting it all out.
It makes me so sad. He feels so lost.
I mean, it's interesting that he's learning about, it's kind of the catch-22, right? Like, he's learning about man's vices and murder and selfishness, which, in order to protect us from those things, we formed into governments and created laws and organized into society. But then he's also learning that these governments and societies become corrupt and exploit people, and it's only, again, the selfishness of the leaders at the top, but then those things, right, that division and that selfishness and the corruption from the government, as he's learning in this book, in Ruins of Empires, ends up destroying the society that was created, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it becomes so corrupt. And I just find it interesting that we here in 2022, we go, oh, that's no way that could happen to America, right? There's no way it could happen to us. But that's what's happened throughout all of human history. Societies form governments, and then they become corrupt. And as he says, inequality and rank and poverty and religion and all these forces tear the society apart until the empire falls.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand why people in modern America don't think that we are so imbued with a protection from that same thing. If a newborn baby monster can get woke within a year, people, open your eyes. You can look around and see what's going on in our society, and you can decide what trajectory we're on. Are we on the upward swing or the downward swing? I'll leave that for an exercise for the reader, shall we say.
I mean, you asked a good question, and maybe you meant it to be rhetorical, but I like answering rhetorical questions because my answer is how many people are reading Frankenstein? How many people are reading deeply every day? I mean, we don't necessarily, I don't know why you would hear about a big news story of like, whole class reads book and loves it, but it's like whole school bans books, or,
sure,
people fighting to ban the very things that I feel like not only bring your own version of enlightenment, because if you read enough, you're not going to get one view. So I'm not advocating one view. Like, you have to think like I think or read the books I read, although maybe you should, but but the very things that can save us, in my opinion, I feel like that's the very thing that people start to ruin. And
sure,
I don't know, the people who are in power or who ruin it or are bringing the downfall, why can't they see it? Because you would think they have some sort of education. Or some sort of, but then again, I see some people who are in power, and I'm like, nope,
right.
You seem like a dum-dum.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think it is decline. I mean, what is the conceit of this podcast, right? It's classic books that you probably haven't read, or maybe you got assigned in school. I haven't read 90% of the stuff that we've done on the show, right? And I consider myself a fairly educated person. But at the same time, I also went to an engineering school and got a hard science degree, right? I didn't have the wide-ranging liberal arts education where you discuss these ideas, and there is a backlash against that sort of education, of a broadening education where you discuss ideas and whatnot. Our society, I think, prioritizes, well, what's your skill? What kind of job are you gonna have when you get out of college? You need a hard skill. You need a tech skill. You need to get something that's gonna benefit you in the job market, as opposed to something that's going to expand your mind and help you better society.
Can't
right?
we do all of it?
I think we should, and that's the point of a broader liberal arts education. I think there are people that are too afraid of ideas.
For sure.
Parents...
They're terrified.
if you have raised your children correctly, don't be afraid of them being exposed to other cultures, people's ideas. Like, I don't know what parents are afraid of.
That they won't be like them. That their version of correct is very small. It's very small. Yeah. So if you are think of our dad and how many conversations you've had with him, and he blames my indoctrinated liberal arts education, and for you, I guess he blames you went all over the world.
I don't know. I guess travel is evil now. I don't know. I have a science degree. Gosh darn it! I didn't read this stuff in school.
But he traveled too and wasn't always like this. He closed his own world in on himself as he got older.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why. I told him one day, I was like, I think it's because you're getting older and you see your own mortality, and you are worried that the things you thought would come to fruition in your lifetime before your eyes may not. And so you're doubling down. And he kind of gave me the dad laugh. Like, okay, that's a ridiculous thought. Yeah. That's what I thought. I mean, he told me, he's like, don't pay off your school loans. We'll all be raptured. And I'm like, Daddy, what? I have to pay my school loans.
Pay your
or the government will rapture me or something. I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
But I think the issue is the version of correct.
Yeah.
But I like what you're saying, because in my job we talk about trusting kids, trusting that if you, in our version, if you put good books in front of them and then ask them good open-ended questions, they have really good thoughts, and you don't have to come at them with like, here is the moral, rah, rah, rah. Like, you don't have to. They see it. Kids are really smart, and you can trust them. And I like what you're saying. Like, as a parent, you're terrified.
Yeah.
That X won't happen, or they won't become a good person or the person that you want them to be. But if you just do your job right, I guess you and I are biased too. Our version of right or correct is like open, honest.
A little more,
I think. Speaking
more
for
based
you a little
on
bit.
Yeah, I mean, more based on letting people live in trusting people. And I mean, the country was founded on freedom. Like, I feel like we should be trending towards more freedom and fewer restrictions on what people can and cannot do, as long as it doesn't impinge on anyone else.
Right. Isn't that the whole point?
I thought it was, but apparently maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Maybe you are.
Concede that perhaps I am. All right, so now we'll end the family therapy portion of the podcast, and we'll move on to chapter 14 here. And so now, in 14, the creature learns of the history of the cottagers. And I just thought this was fun because this adds yet another level of abstraction to this book. So to take it all from the top down, right?
Oh, man.
We've got a letter from Walton to his sister, which is Dr. Frankenstein telling Walton his story, which is the monster telling Dr. Frankenstein his story, which is now the cottagers' story through the monster, through Frankenstein, through Walton, to this letter to his sister.
The sister's probably like, what? Isn't
right.
Maybe we're the sister now. We're the sister.
At this point, right, we're reading this. So when, I studied Middle Eastern studies in grad school, and one thing that I found interesting is Hadith scholarship, where Muslim scholars debate, what did the Prophet do and not do, and they have to get, okay, this is a story we know, and so what's the chain of who told who, saw this to that, and what are the biographies of all those people, and how trustworthy are they all, and then they determine like, how trustworthy is this story? So we can kind of do that. How trustworthy is this story of the family de Lacy now, coming from the monster, through Frankenstein, through Walton, in a letter that the sister, I guess, is putting into book form and giving to us. So we have, 4 different people here relaying this story. So I thought the level of abstraction of this story is kind of fun to kind of review where we're at here.
And you have to remember it, though, because Shelley doesn't keep bringing that in. It's not like,
we
don't pan back out and, Walton is like, and then I didn't have any inks, dear sister, so I have to, but like, we don't get that. It feels...
Although, if you're keeping score at home, we're going to get one more level of abstraction as we learn Safi's story through the cottagers, through the monster, through Frankenstein, to Walton, to the letter to his sister. So we're gonna go one more level down in a minute. Well, we find out that the cottager, the old man, his name is de Lacy. He used to be wealthy, and I thought this was, again, I guess, bringing back these themes of wealth and poverty. I think that Shelley is threading through the whole book. If you remember our dear sweet Elizabeth, the same thing happened to her and her father, right? They were a wealthy family, fell out of wealth, and poverty ended up killing the father. Well, in this case, the de Lacy family used to be wealthy, and they fell into poverty, and the cause of their poverty was actually Safi's dad. Mm-hmm. So Safi's dad is a Turkish merchant who is, I guess, working in France and ran afoul of the government somehow, and apparently whatever he did, the government felt was so egregious, they sentenced him to death. Mm-hmm. Right? And I found this interesting because then bringing in these sort of modern, I guess, ideals of Shelley's that we could say into the story. The story of the merchant kind of gets out, and the entire city feels, well, they're condemning him to death not because of what he allegedly did, but it's because A, he's foreign, he's a Muslim, and B, he's wealthy, and it's not actually his crime that they're condemning him to death. Shelley keeps things vague. She doesn't actually say what he's accused of, but Felix is somehow at the trial, which I thought, were trials like a form of entertainment in those days that Felix would I've never been to a trial. Have you?
No, but you can. I think you can.
You can. I think you can. That's why they have the gallery. You can go in and observe.
Yeah, I know that for some people I went to school with, that was like, if you were a criminal justice major, you had to go observe X number of trials and you just go sit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, a lot of this stuff that we see, like, the only analogous thing I have is I got to sit in some... You can walk in on congressional testimony, like, that you see on TV. Like, you just walk in and sit in the back and maybe get on TV behind whoever's testifying in front of Congress. Well, you get kicked out for that, yeah. But you just kind of get up and come in and out and whatever. But anyway, so Felix is at this trial, and he got so incensed by it, I guess it's sort of a show trial, he didn't feel like there was enough to convict the merchant, that he vows he's going to rescue him. So apparently this is really bad, whatever the French government is doing.
Yeah.
That he's this random guy I've never met. I'm going to bust him out of prison.
It ignites Felix's activism in an extreme way.
It does. So he does. So he gets some fake passports. He somehow gets him out. And all the credit I'm giving Shelley for being, modern feminist writing in 1817, she kind of takes a step back here with old Felix, because the merchant, he says, wow, you're going to get me out of prison. I'll pay you this and that. And Felix is like, no, please. I'm doing this just because I believe in you so much. And then he sees his daughter and he's like, oh, hey, wait, but that I'll take.
Well,
give me your daughter.
It's not exactly. The merchant notices him and his daughter giving each other googly eyes.
Right.
The merchant
Even though
is
they
like,
can't speak to each other.
oh, I see what's happening here. So he promises his daughter, but Shelley does tell us they liked each other first.
Sure, of course. Two people that can't speak the same language are just like,
well, he is saving her dad.
He is. This is
and
true.
Maybe he's like way hot and saving her dad.
I guess he might be. So then apparently Safi gets a French-speaking interpreter to help write letters to Felix to tell her like how much she cares about him and whatnot. And old monster boy here, he made copies of them. He says, yeah, I found pen and paper and I copied the letters down. So I have these copies here. So that proves what I'm telling you is true. Which I thought, does that really prove it? Like, you just have
you could have written it yourself.
Letters that you just could have written yourself, man. Maybe he's a good author. I don't know. Is it odd to copy someone else's love letters down just to practice your writing? Mm-hmm. I was just making sure that maybe our monster's he's not all there.
Well, he was just born. He was born yesterday, so he doesn't know.
So social norms, he doesn't quite have that down yet. But Shelley, she can't quite, you were mentioning earlier that she's sort of writing and nodding to the people and the people of the day, right? Mm-hmm. So she does here as well. She says, oh, by the way, yeah, Safi, her mom was a Christian Arab.
Yeah.
And her mom taught her religion, so Safi's a Christian too, so it's okay for Felix to
and
marry
she's
her.
White. Like, she's...
Right.
Where it's clear she has pale... It said she has fair or pale skin. Not pale. Fair. Because of her mom.
Fair skin. Because of her mom. Right. So she's... she's probably Palestinian, just to throw that out there.
She doesn't want to push her audience too far.
Right, exactly. Because most of the most Arab Christians are Egyptians, wouldn't classify themselves as Arabs. They're Egyptian, but those are the major Christian populations in the Middle East are Palestinians and the Egyptians. So she's probably a Palestinian Arab married to a Turkish guy, which makes sense because it's close to Turkey anyway.
You don't think she's Egyptian?
Probably not, because she would describe herself as Egyptian.
Oh, that's Arab. Right. You said that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they sort of separate themselves out a little bit. Plus, she wouldn't be as fair-skinned, I think, if she was Egyptian. She would be a little bit darker-skinned. So Shelley's kind of telling her readers, it's okay. She's Christian. It's fine. Felix can marry her. So Felix gets them out, and then the merchant decides he's going to double-cross Felix.
Right, he was never going to give him his daughter.
Right. But in the interim, France figures out what happened, so I guess Felix's plan wasn't completely airtight. And so he grabs his sister and dad and throws them into prison. They become destitute. And then their trial happens and they're exiled to Germany, which is where we end up with these French speakers in Germany, where the monster finally reached them. And then the merchant is going to go back to Constantinople and take Safi with it, but Safi figures it out. And she escapes with an interpreter, an attendant, who ends up dying. So then she's sort of on her own, lost in Germany. And that's where we close 14.
The reason why... Well, Safi doesn't want to... Her dad wants to take her back, right?
Right.
And at the time, it's Constantinople, right? That's where he's going.
Right.
That's where they're from.
Exactly.
And she describes, or at least it's described to us, that she doesn't want to go back because she was sickened at the prospect of again returning to Asia and being immured within the walls of a harem, allowed only to occupy herself with infantile amusements, ill-suited to the temper of her soul, now accustomed to grand ideas and noble emulation for virtue. Is that accurate? Is that what would happen?
I mean, I guess if the merchant's wealthy, he would sell her off to someone. I mean, she would be sold off in those days. I mean, again, this is sort of Shelley dropping her feminism in here, right? Like, she's saying, oh, she's got these ideas. She wants to be a modern woman, able and free and able to do whatever she wants, which, I mean, I don't know British feminism in the 1800s. That's more your jam, right?
Is it?
But I'm just curious, because Shelley is purporting it, or at least presenting it as that she has all these freedoms and British society is more equal. And I'm thinking to myself, I mean, we've read Jane Austen. Like, was it really? I mean, this is contemporaneous with Austen.
Yeah, she says,
and all the stuff we've read.
She said of Safi, she said the prospect of marrying a Christian and remaining in a country where women were allowed to take a rank in society was enchanting to her. And I'm thinking, but there's still extreme limits on that. What rank in society is she taking, other than like rank of lady, like, and being able to come and go, and as other books that we've read, accept visitors and go walk around in Bath.
Right, exactly.
I don't know. When I think of take rank, I'm thinking power, agency, and maybe you can, but you still, as we've read, still you stand apart if you do those things. You stand apart from society.
Sure.
Anyway, I just was wondering, like, is it really going to be as terrible as she thinks, or is that just Shelley telling her audience, like, it's going to be everything that you thought it would be, all of the stereotypes, everything terrible that you think, that's what's going to happen.
And I think that is also, we're giving Shelley some credit here, but I think still she's doing a little othering of Middle Easterners at this point, Sure. All right. I'm going to snap out real quick. Our air conditioner is working, so I'm going to close the windows real quick. And turn this fan off, too.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. That's blowing cold. I love it. Yeah, we moved the kids down to the living room last night because it was so cold, so hot up here.
I remember a time where you didn't care for air conditioning. Remember that?
Well, we grew up without it.
I know we did.
At least I did. It was miserable.
We didn't get air conditioning until sometime in the early 2000s, late 90s.
Oh, yeah.
At the house.
I mean,
there was that unit in the wall.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up. Well, I grew up more than you, but Mom and Dad's bedroom had
the wall unit, and we slept in
the
there.
wall unit, but that was it. Yeah, occasionally we did. Yeah, occasionally we'd sleep on the floor in there when it got super hot. But otherwise, I remember I had a fan in my window, a box fan in the window, and just sat there and sweat because my windows were I guess yours were too.
Mm-hmm.
They were just on the angle wall, so we didn't even get a cross breeze. Oh, it was miserable. And you couldn't get one anyway because yours less so. The window on the driveway.
Right.
Mine was
neighbors.
Right facing the building. Right.
Yeah.
Yours, you had the porch at least, so you could probably get a little bit more on that side window. I don't know. Anyway,
it was above the porch, behind the evergreens was one window, and then the other one was the driveway.
And see, you also had the shade from the trees.
Mm-hmm.
I did not, so the sun just beat in through my back window.
Mom would just wet a washcloth and lay it on me. She'd be like, "Here, it'll keep it cool." And it did not.
I remember going into the attic in the summer trying to play with my toys.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I told Susan, like, I used to live in the basement. Like, we'd put chairs down there and just sit in the basement.
Oh, I don't remember that.
No, I used to. I used to hang out in the basement a lot.
I played in the basement.
All right, I'm going to snap us back in, and we'll go to chapter 15.
On Big Pete.
All right.
Beep, beep.
Yeah. All right, so then we got chapter 15, and tying all these books together, he finds a portmanteau, which is a Lewis Carroll coined term from Alice in Wonderland, which I love it. The term is just in common use by this point. It's a portmanteau.
That's what it is.
Boxed things up all together. So he finds a portmanteau with some clothes and some books. And the 3 books he finds Paradise Lost, he finds Plutarch's Lives, and he finds The Sorrows of Werter. All right, so I have not read any of these. So Paradise Lost, have you read? You probably have, I'm guessing.
Sections. I don't think I've ever read the whole thing.
Okay, so it is an epic poem about the fall of man from the Garden of Eden and about original sin. And my only exposure to Paradise Lost is back in the days where I would watch can't do that on television. In the classroom scenes, they would have like 2 dice, and you're like, pair of dice lost. You know, that's my connection to Paradise Lost. The whole story right there. So then the next one was Plutarch's Lives, which apparently, I guess only half of it is even still in existence, according to Wikipedia, that we only have copies. But what Plutarch's Lives is he took biographies of Greeks and Romans and sort of paired them to show either complementary or contrasting virtues and vices between famous people, famous Greeks and famous Romans. So they were paired up, and every 2 to 4 biographies, he would kind of do a summary of these famous folk. And I think he wrote 48 in total, but only like 23 or so survive or something like that. And I guess the copy, he wrote it in the 2nd century originally, but the manuscripts that survive are from much later that we have of these stories. And it's just sort of a window into ancient histories and what societies were like and what people were like, and what great men of ancient Greece and ancient Rome were. And the last one, Sorrows of Werter, I'll let you take that because you actually have a copy.
I have a copy. Mine's called The Sorrows of Young Werther. Here it is, The Sorrows of Young Werther, and there's sad Werther on the screen right there.
He's crying.
He's crying. That's all he does. I read this in college in a British literature class, I think, a romantic literature class with my favorite college professor, Dr. Vernoy. At the time, she was Dr. Vernoy Epp. We called her Dr. V.E., and then she was Dr. Vernoy. I don't know what happened to her, but I took the class because of her, and I really, really enjoyed learning from her. But I remember we were laughing at it, and it was presented to us as like this example of extreme emotion. Extreme, to the point where like I even have like my notes in the margins here where he goes from extreme high to extreme low over admittedly small things.
So he is bipolar.
He says, what moves me are not the great rare disasters of the world, the floods that wash away your villages, the earthquakes that swallow your cities. What undermines my heart is the consuming power that lies concealed in the universe of nature. The power that has formed nothing, that has not destroyed its neighbor, destroyed itself. So I stagger in horror. Heaven and earth and their weaving forces about me. I see nothing but eternally devouring, eternally cud-chewing monster.
Wow.
And eventually at the end, I think he falls in love with someone who doesn't love him back, and the unrequited love brings him to suicide, and he shoots himself at the end. And
yikes.
Yeah.
All right.
And so that's what, I mean, Junior is talking about that here. The disquisitions upon death and suicide were calculated to fill me with wonder. I did not pretend to enter into the merits of the case, yet I inclined towards the opinions of the hero, whose extinction I wept without precisely understanding it. So you mentioned earlier that Junior believes that the only end to his extreme sorrow would be death, and yet he doesn't want to die. He wants to stay alive, and so he's like, then I'm just subject to this life that
pain,
I've got.
This sorrow, yeah. So he reads these books, and he gets very introspective with them. So as we just talked about, Werther, is it Werther?
I don't know the German pronunciation. It was published in Germany in 1774. So The Sorrows of Young Werther. Sorrows of Young Werther. I don't know.
Werther? Yeah, there's no H in the Shelley, and it's just Werther in the
there's an H in this version, so I don't know.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. I don't speak German, so I can't speak to that. But he learns gloom through that, and he relates it to himself, and he gets very introspective, asking, who am I? Why do I exist? Yeah. Do I have a future? Where am I going? Do I have a purpose or a destiny? And as a guy who's lived for about a year now, just sort of in a shack watching these people, he doesn't really have any. He doesn't even know where he comes from, right? He doesn't know why he was created or where he's from. He will, but right now he doesn't.
He's asking himself the great existential question.
He is. He really is. Then for Plutarch's Lives, he gets sort of high-minded ideals. So instead of just worrying about hunger and thirst and biological need and of life, he gets these sort of, he's thinking about thinking, right? He's thinking about governance and virtue and what it means to be a leader and why we have governments and why these men did what they did. And then from Paradise Lost, at first he says he identified with Adam because Adam was a created creature and he was a created creature. They each had no history. They each sort of didn't know why they were created. But then as he reads the story, he identifies more with Satan as someone who is cast out and becomes envious, right? So, Satan's great sin is that he wanted to be as powerful as God, and he was jealous, and that's why he was cast out of heaven. And he feels that as well because he's envious of the family and the love they have that he is denied. And so he's not just learning, good emotions and high ideals. He's learning, I'm jealous and I'm envious as well. As he's going through this.
It's striking me right now what an amazing argument for being a well-read person Shelley is putting forth. He's reading fiction, he's reading poetry, he's reading nonfiction, he's reading histories, which are nonfiction, but it seems like from what you said of the fall of empires that there is a argument in that.
Sure, right.
And some rhetoricians or people who do rhetorical analysis would say nothing is free of an argument, right? Even if it's quote unquote nonfiction. But he's becoming how else would something that just wakes up one day without parents, without guidance, how else would something become a person? And that's what we're seeing him do. He's becoming a person. He's self-reflective. He's also looking out at others and thinking how they fit, where he fits. He's developing emotion and seeing how those emotions fit with others. He's developing empathy. And how do you do it? You read. It's just hitting me just this very moment, and it's incredible.
Public libraries. I'm telling you, people, public libraries are a treasure that we have in this country. And I have lived in countries that do not have public libraries. And it is... It's a loss.
How do you get books? You just have to buy
them? So in Jordan, they don't have public libraries. So there are like private libraries you can join, right? So you pay a membership fee basically, right? And then you can borrow X number of books or whatever from them. But American public libraries are like a crown jewel of our society. I can go on to my library's website, my little county library website, any book I want, anywhere. I just type in the ISBN and they find it for me.
ILL, baby.
You know it. If they don't have it in the library system, they get me the book from wherever in the country a library has it. It's beautiful. I have to do no work. I pay no money for it. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Anyway, shout out to public libraries.
And the librarians 100%. In them.
Yes. They do yeoman's work getting us the things we need. It's amazing. Anyway, people, support your local library. Go. There's and it's not just high-minded ideals. I have a giant volume of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics that I got from the library. I read the entire run of Invincible that I got through interlibrary loan. There's comic books, people. There's books on everything. Anyway, public libraries. We love them. And shout out to the kids' book section, too, by the way. So if you have kids, there are so many amazing picture books to teach your kids anything. Any of these. So the stuff we were talking about, that we did not get in our public school education, I have learned so much just reading the picture books my kids bring home. All kinds of subjects from cultures and American history and African American history and just things I did not know in my own public school and engineering school educations. Just amazing stuff that you can learn. It's fantastic. Anyway.
It's, if I want to know something, I'm like, I need to get Vince a book on it and read it to him
yes,
at night.
Exactly. Exactly. Because there's usually back matter that you can read
absolutely.
As the adult to get the full story.
And it's quick and it's understandable. Yes. So you, like, because you run a gamble buying something like for adults, like maybe it's not written well or it's bored or whatever. It's not digestible.
Or it's 300 pages and you don't want to read through all that. Yeah.
Also, shout out to like Vincent discovered the author of Captain Underpants does Dogman, I think it is.
Yes, he does.
And the ridiculous amount of literary allusions in Dogman. I accidentally picked one that was all literary allusion of East of Eden, which is one of my favorite books. And I was just losing my mind taking like pictures of the pages and sending them to my work friends who are literary people. I'm like, oh, look, it's Tim Shell. Look, it's this character. And Vince is like, but someday I hope he reads East of Eden and is like, wait, I remember this from Dogman.
Yes. Fortunately, so I will admit I had to ban Dogman.
Oh, really?
I was like, this is too...
I only read one of
them, buddy.
But...
we had a Dogman phase a few years ago, and I was like, guys, no, you gotta... There's so much better stuff out there. So thankfully we've moved on past Dogman. Anyway.
Oh, come on, I was so excited.
Good. They do like the titles of the stories, because then when they see their actual real books, they're like, wait, that's like the Dogman. I was like, yeah, bud, that's where it comes from. So the other thing that Frankenstein the Junior discovers is he finds Frankenstein's journal. So the clothes that he took from Frankenstein, I guess Frankenstein stuck his journal in the pocket, and I guess like you do. But so he finds it and he reads it, and he gets basically the 4 or 5 months before he was created, he gets a blow-by-blow account of what Frankenstein was thinking and feeling and going through. And what he discovers, and this, I don't know how Shelley thought about it at first, but apparently in the journal, Frankenstein writes that he was disgusted by his creation. Mm-hmm. Which I found interesting because when we were reading through the chapters of him doing his 2 years of intense, like, soul-sucking work to build the creature, I thought he had said he made him beautiful, and he loved what he did.
Until he was alive.
But as soon as life came into him, he was revolted by him, that he couldn't look at him anymore, and he freaked out. So, I find it interesting. So I wonder, through the whole process, Frankenstein is telling this story to Walton to discourage him from going after the North Pole, because creating this life and this creature was Frankenstein's life, passion that he poured into and destroyed his life. I wonder if Frankenstein was really disgusted by what he was doing, but he had this burning drive that he had to do this thing that still revolted him, and that's why he had the breakdown. He's like, even though I know this is bad and this is like this thing is like, it's almost like a drug addiction, isn't it? Like, I hate this thing so much, but I am so driven that I must do it. I must create this creature, even though every fiber of his body is revolted by what he is doing.
So like the extreme cognitive dissonance at the end, finally, for lack of a better word, made him snap.
When all was said and done, when he couldn't sort of just pour himself into the work was done, and all he was left with was the disgust as the creature comes alive. Right, Frankenstein breaks, I think.
That's a good point. Because
anyway, I just thought that was interesting that because she writes that he was disgusted by the creature, but she also wrote that he made him beautiful.
Because he's like he's also like clandestinely taking body parts, and
yes,
it can't smell good. He doesn't have refrigeration.
No,
and it takes him a long time.
Just the fact that he's the people he has to deal with, right? So Frankenstein comes from wealth and money and class and status, and he has to deal with the guys that are ditch diggers and crypt keepers and, the lowest of the low to dig him up the body parts, Right, we don't have Igor in this, but, think about the stunted little guy that is stumping around stealing body parts for the doctor, you know?
Yeah, he has to do it himself.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And deal with all those people that are actually going to do the work for him.
And what's that? But like, is that unpleasant to deal with those people, you're saying?
I would think for Frankenstein it would be, yeah, because he's from class and money and power.
So
right, which ties into this theme that Shelley's talking about through the whole book, right?
So he like to him, he's debasing himself.
And
that's what he feels like.
Right, because why else would he snap at the moment, like he's completed his work, like this is what he's trying to do, and when he accomplishes what he's trying to do, now he goes crazy and loses his mind.
Yeah, it's not like he was like, oh, "You're here! I'm so excited you're here. We're gonna be best friends. This is awesome." Mm-hmm. Like,
yeah, and he never thought what did he think was going to happen when he put life into the creature? Like he didn't have a plan, next step. Like what's the next phase of this? I'm gonna teach him. No, it was just, dude, I'm freaking out. I'm going to bed. Like get out of here.
Maybe he didn't really think it was gonna work.
Maybe.
Have you ever done something where you're like, oh my god, that worked. That actually worked.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he's like, now what?
Yeah, it freaked him out. Like maybe he thought it was going to fail, and it freaked him out when it actually worked. He didn't know what to do next because in the back of his mind, he really thought it wouldn't. I don't know. That's a good point.
Poor Junior.
All right, so now he's figuring out that his creator, now that he's learning about his creator, and he's figuring out his creator kind of hates him. The creature continues to watch the cottage, and now everybody's happy. So Safi's there. He mentions servants, so I guess Safi still has money, and she's brought people along. So there's just more people in the house now, and everyone's happy, and this it's overwhelming him, and he's, I've been thinking about meeting this guy for so long. I'm going to go talk to the old man.
Yeah, and
is what he decides.
Remember in the early chapter, he was like, I have to be with them, and he decides the old man is the right one because he's blind. I can't scare him.
He won't freak out.
Yeah.
So he waits until everybody's out. Everybody goes for a walk. And so he goes in and he tells the old man, hey, I think you're a nice guy. I need help. So I have been under the protection. I've gotten in some trouble. I've been under the protection of these people, but they don't know it. And I want to tell them, and I need help. And the old guy is like kind of trying to figure it out. And he's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can help you. I'll advocate on your behalf with your benefactors, who helped you, who can I, where do they live? And he says, oh, well, they live real close to here. Wink, wink. But then he hears everybody coming back as he's in there. And he blurts out, you're the family. You've been helping me. I need your help, old man.
He like falls on his knees and grabs the old man around the legs, and he's like begging.
Right. He's beseeching him strenuously. But Felix and Agatha and Safi come in, and Felix sees this monster touching his father, freaks out, and he jumps in to protect his dad and starts to beat him. And the monster says, even though I could have crushed him with my hands, the fact that Felix is attacking him just broke his heart, and he runs.
It breaks my heart too. Oh, I wanted it to work.
Oh, and somehow he's able to get back into his little hole undetected, which, again, I don't really know how that works, Shelley, but sure. And that's where we kind of leave chapter 15.
He says, the old man, De Lacy, says to him, he says, do not despair. To be friendless is indeed to be unfortunate, but the hearts of men, when unprejudiced by any obvious self-interest, are full of brotherly love and charity. Rely, therefore, on your hopes, and if these friends are good and amiable, do not despair. I thought that was, like, men are good as long as they have no obvious self-interest. Right. Which is like, ugh. How often does that happen? Oh, man, I really wanted it to work. I'm, like, I'm with Junior in the moment where he's like, oh, man, everyone's coming back. It seems like the right time. But then he gets too desperate. He should have visited the old man quietly for like days, and then slowly describe like, look, I am absolutely hideous looking.
Tell everybody.
Please. Fell in a fire. I was in a like, not to say
and
that people who have terrible burns are hideous looking, but making something up where he could explain it away. And then De Lacy could be like, look, I haven't seen him, obviously, but this guy needs help. He's super nice. But it's also creepy that he's like, I've been around here helping and doing things. Like, he told him about the clandestine activities that he's been doing and how he's been there undetected, which is the weird part in and of itself. Or, I mean, it would weird them out, whether or not he was made of dead body parts or not. But I've been hiding in your hovel getting wood for you.
Right. I've been watching you for months now.
In fact, because of you, I've learned to read and write. And like, how long?
Exactly.
Ugh. Oh, so sad. Did you feel sad? Did you feel panic? I felt sad and panicked.
It's a little sad. So, have you heard of the book Wonder?
Yes. Oh, I've seen the movie. Okay. I've heard of the book.
You've seen the movie, okay. The kids read the books, but it's the same kind of thing. Like, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You know, that this guy is, you know, the creature just, yes, he looks different, but he's still a person now and just wants the same thing that everybody wants. And it's just really, I mean, when you think about our country and some of the problems we have and how we really treat people who are different poorly as a society, it's heartbreaking because everybody wants basically the same thing.
So true.
You know? And I don't know. Treat people with kindness, people. Like, that's the, you know, think better of people. That's all it comes down to. Like, be nice to the creature. He's cutting wood for you. I mean, it's okay.
He's stinky and made of dead body parts, but
but he just wants to read books with you.
Yeah.
You know, it's not his fault.
He just wants to be your friend. He just wants companionship and love, and being turned away in and of itself is one thing, but then to be turned away with absolute horror and people trying to just scream and beat you and you're not doing anything. You just kind of like show up and then people freak out.
Yeah.
Makes me
treating people differently based on the way they look. Shelley, what are you trying to tell us here?
I'm not sure. I think this is her original idea and it only happens in this book and I don't know what she's getting at.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our section for this week.
Good section. One of the best.
It was. Next time, we're going to read up through chapter 20. All right. So that'll be in your podcast feeds next week. And you can, if you're listening to this on release day, on Tuesday, you can probably check out, because Tuesday nights, every other Tuesday, we do a little live read. So we'll do some of these upcoming chapters. We'll live read over on Reddit on r/readwithme. So you can check us out there if you're listening to this on release day on Tuesday. And anything else for this week before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so. Other than that, folks are folks. And if you don't have any obvious self-interest, you can be friends with one another despite your differences.
You can. Understanding. Yeah, just ask people questions and get to know people. That's all you got to do. All right, so we're going to leave that there for this week. We appreciate y'all listening. If you would, head on over to Spotify and give us a star rating, or Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review. You know, tell us how you found the show, and giving us ratings will help other people who are looking for classic books find the show. You can also follow us on social media. We are at CYSTpod on Twitter, Instagram, and the Facebook, as well as all of our video discussion episodes and readings are also up on YouTube. Just search for Classics You Slept Through on YouTube. You can like and subscribe us over on YouTube. The more subscribers we get, eventually we can get our own custom URLs. That way you don't have to search for us. So why don't you just
do it.
Subscribe on YouTube.
Just do it. Do us a favor.
Really, it's like one episode a week. It's not even that much to your YouTube subscriptions. You won't even notice. Just do it. Everybody's got a YouTube account. Just subscribe on YouTube, folks, please. It would help us out. All right, so until next time, it is graduation week, so make sure your caps and gowns are pressed and
Good
ready.
work, everybody.
Congrats, everyone.
Peace.